On August 29th, 2005, New Orleans did not just endure a storm. That city was sunk by the very system that had been built to save it. As the levees collapsed one after another, before Hurricane Katrina, floodwaters poured in from every direction, turning one of America's most famous cities into a land of chaos, death, and despair. But what made Katrina the most painful scar in modern American history was not just the force of nature. It was the fact that this disaster had been seen in advance, had been warned about in advance, and still, no one stopped it. To truly understand what happened on August 29th, 2005, we must first decode the very nature of the city of New Orleans. Located in southern Louisiana, New Orleans is trapped in a geographic vise. To the north lies Lake Pontchartrain, and to the south, the surging Mississippi River. This is one of the most vulnerable cities on Earth because of a chilling truth that most of its urban area lies completely below sea level. In some neighborhoods, the ground sits as much as 10 feet below sea level. The only reason New Orleans was able to exist and grow in its current form was because of a massive and tightly interconnected protection system. It was a network of levees, flood walls, and drainage canals designed to keep water from pouring in from every side. For generations, the people here lived with a quiet but absolute belief that this system had to work perfectly, because the alternative was something no one dared to imagine. If this system failed, New Orleans would not just flood in the ordinary sense, it would truly sink and vanish from the map. The Katrina disaster was not a sudden accident of nature, but the result of a silent weakening over 40 years. Engineers and scientists had noticed cracks in this defense system decades earlier. They wrote countless reports, ran repeated simulations, and continuously issued warnings about how inadequate the levees were against a major storm. As early as the 1990s, models had accurately predicted what would happen if a slow-moving storm struck the city directly, and the results were always red alert warnings. In 2004, exactly 1 year before the catastrophe, FEMA funded a large-scale disaster simulation exercise called Hurricane Pam. The scenario assumed a slow-moving Category 3 hurricane striking directly into New Orleans. The results were horrifying. Tens of thousands dead, the entire city submerged, and a humanitarian crisis far beyond the control of the United States. But when researchers presented this truth, they were met only with cold indifference. One scientist bitterly described feeling like a madman screaming in vain, while federal officials sat in the back room and laughed. The problem was not a lack of information, but the response afterward. Absolutely nothing. On August 23rd, 2005, the tragedy began with a tropical depression forming in the southeastern Bahamas. Within just 24 hours, it intensified into Tropical Storm Katrina and began moving westward. After crossing Florida and making its first landfall as a Category 1 storm, Katrina entered the Gulf of Mexico. There, it encountered something that completely changed the nature of the storm. It was abnormally warm water reaching 30 degrees Celsius. This water acted like the highest grade fuel for a tropical system. Thanks to the combination of ocean heat and upper-level airflow, Katrina intensified at a terrifying rate. On the morning of August 28th, it exploded into a Category 5 superstorm with sustained winds of up to 175 miles per hour. Its central pressure dropped to 902 millibars, making it one of the most violent storms ever recorded in Atlantic history. Mayor Ray Nagin was forced to issue the first mandatory evacuation order in the city's history. He stressed that this was a situation of the highest possible danger. But for hundreds of thousands of people with no means of transport, the elderly and the sick, the order to leave was simply an order that could not be carried out. At 6:10 a.m. on August 29, 2005, Katrina officially made landfall in Louisiana as a powerful Category 3 hurricane. Its winds reached 125 miles per hour, and its central pressure was 920 millibars. At first, a false sense of relief spread across the city as the eye of the storm veered slightly to the east. But that was only the calm before the deluge. Even before dawn, the massive wall of water pushed ahead of the storm had already begun overtopping and eroding the levee system. At around 5 a.m. at the Industrial Canal, a waterway long warned to be a deadly funnel, the floodwall system burst open. Water began pouring through the first breach, then the second, then the third. Over the next 24 hours, there were more than 50 breaches in the levee system surrounding New Orleans. The system that people had trusted for 40 years had officially collapsed. The water did not rise slowly. It surged in like a tsunami, swallowing all life within seconds. In Lower Ninth Ward, the horror unfolded in ways words could not describe. Those who chose to remain in their homes suddenly saw water pour into their rooms, rising to the waist, to the chest, and then above their heads in an instant. Their only choice was to climb into the attic in search of temporary safety. But as the water kept rising, attics became death traps. Later, rescue crews found countless AX marks on ceilings throughout the flooded neighborhoods. They were proof of people's desperate attempt to hack their way onto rooftops to avoid drowning below. By August 31st, 80% of New Orleans was underwater, with depths in some places reaching 15 feet. Entire large neighborhoods such as Lakeview, Gentilly, and St. Bernard were completely submerged. The infrastructure disaster turned into a humanitarian catastrophe as tens of thousands of people who could not evacuate fled to the Louisiana Superdome and the New Orleans Convention Center. There, food and clean water ran out. Toilets stopped working, and the air grew thick with the smell of contamination and death in the suffocating 95-degree Fahrenheit heat. The slow and poorly coordinated response of the federal government, especially FEMA, turned New Orleans into an earthly hell exposed live on television before the stunned eyes of the world. When the last waters were finally drained, the true scale of the tragedy became clear. Katrina's official death toll stopped at around 1,400 people. One painful truth is that the storm did not kill at random. Nearly half of the victims were over 74 years old, the most vulnerable people with the fewest options for escaping the floodwaters. Material damage reached a record $125 billion, making Katrina the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. More than 134,000 housing units in New Orleans, equal to 70% of all occupied homes in the city, were damaged. The population dropped by more than half in just 1 year. In 2006, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was finally forced to admit a brutal truth. Design flaws in substandard construction were the direct cause of the levee failures. Experts concluded that 2/3 of the floodwater could have been avoided if the levees had held. The federal government later committed more than $14 billion to rebuild the system. Yet 20 years later, the question of whether the current system is truly safe remains a constant haunting fear every hurricane season. And from that comes Katrina's most brutal lesson. This was not an unpredictable disaster. It had been seen in advance. It had been simulated. It had been warned about. But when the decisive moment came, everything that was supposed to save the city did not hold. And the price that was paid cannot be measured in concrete, steel, or federal budgets, but in human lives, in erased neighborhoods, and in pain that will last for generations. After Katrina, The federal government ultimately spent more than $14 billion to rebuild and reinforce the entire defense system. On paper, New Orleans today is stronger than before, but the fear has never truly disappeared. Every hurricane season, along with the wind and dark clouds, the memory of 2005 returns as well. 20 years have passed. Music still plays on Frenchman Street. Tourists still come. Festivals still continue. And the city still lives. But New Orleans after Katrina is never again the same New Orleans as before Katrina. Recovery is real, but it is uneven. Some areas have risen again. Others are communities that have never truly returned. Katrina did not just drown a city. It exposed the deepest fractures beneath the modern surface of America. It showed that a nation may possess technology, money, and power, yet still fail catastrophically when warnings are ignored and the most vulnerable people are left behind. And that may be the most painful truth of this entire tragedy. The storm was not the only force that destroyed New Orleans. The system finished the rest. Thank you for watching. If this story made you think, leave a comment and let me know. And if you want to keep joining these journeys into the disasters that changed human history, do not forget to subscribe. See you again in the next video.